Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm John Harrington, editor of PRWeek UK, and I'm joined by my colleagues Danny Rogers, editor-in-chief, and Siobhan Holt, deputy editor. How are you both? Surviving the heat?
Just about. I'm not built for this weather.
No, same. How about you, Danny? How are you finding the difference between here and southern France?
Yeah, I only left Cannes late yesterday and I'm back in the UK. And I must say, it's pretty much as hot here, except of course we don't have aircon in the UK. So in some ways it's more bearable in France.
Yeah, well, I hope we can all find our ways to keep cool over the next few days. I feel there's going to be a big thunderstorm coming tomorrow, so hopefully that will help, but we'll see. Now, today's podcast is all about Cannes. The International Festival of Creativity concluded on Friday today as we're recording this, and as always, there are plenty of talking points. So Danny, as we mentioned, you were there. It'd be good to get your overall thoughts, really. How did you find it compared to recent years? We know that numbers were down by 25% in terms of entries. Did you see that reflected? Was it less busy or more or less the same?
No, it didn't feel any less busy at all, actually, on La Croisette. It was absolutely manic. It was very difficult to walk down the main. Croisette is the main thoroughfare that goes down the coast alongside all the main venues for Cannes. And it was almost impossible to walk. There was just so many people with lanyards walking the opposite direction all the time. It was also extremely hot, which made walking through those crowds very, very busy. So I think entries were down and probably the Palais itself was down, which of course is the centre of the official Cannes, but the city itself felt busier than ever. And I think there's a lot of activity now, particularly from tech media clients, which is not necessarily part of the main sort of content programme, but nevertheless is filling out the city with lots of delegates and conversations. So yeah, busier than ever, I would say.
That's interesting. I wonder if it was a situation where there were a similar number of entrants, they just didn't enter as many, which could maybe explain why there are still a lot of people there.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, John. The other thing is that it feels about 90%, maybe more American now. So although I think the economy has probably suppressed the people coming from Europe, the UK, possibly South America and Asia, the Americans appear to be here or there in force. Because of course the US economy is still pushing ahead nicely, and obviously the West Coast tech business with the boost of AI is absolutely flourishing. So although we may have dropped from rest of the world, I think the Americans were in Cannes in force.
Right, good stuff. So let's look at the results of the coveted PR Lions, which were announced on Wednesday evening. Siobhan, could you give us a bit of a reminder of what happened there, who the main winners were and what we saw?
Yeah, so the overall trends, there were 37 PR Lions, including the Grand Prix awarded this year. So that's 7 gold, 12 silver and 17 bronze, which is actually down compared to last year. But there were 8 out of the 37 winners were from the UK, which I thought was an interesting stat. Obviously, the Grand Prix, I think we all know, went to Burson and VML London's campaign for the KitKat Heist, which, for those that don't remember, which I'm surprised if you don't, because it was everywhere, was famously the response to the news that a truck carrying 12 tons of KitKat bars had been stolen while it was in transit between Italy and Poland. I think that was in March this year. Separately, VML London actually won 2 gold PR Lions for the KitKat campaign. However, Burson UK wasn't credited in the idea creation for those wins. And overall, at the time of recording, I think it's received about 8 awards so far at the festival. So that included a gold and silver lion in the social and influencer categories as well. Other big winners included Golan Ketchum London's The Relationship Aid for Specsavers, which picked up both a silver and a gold in the PR category. And obviously Golan was the last PR firm to win a PR Lions Grand Prix back in 2024 for its Misheard Versions campaign for the same client, which was Specsavers. Other notable wins included the Swedish Prescription for Visit Sweden by Prime Weber Shamwick in Stockholm, which won a silver lion, and Edelman scooped 2 bronze, one for its work on main flavour energy for Hellmann's mayonnaise by the agency's Toronto office, and then its second was for the Unburied Casket for Women for Change, and that was by its Johannesburg office. And then other winners include The Legacy of Virginia Giuffre by Dinny von Muffling Communications of New York, which received a bronze lion, and that did quite well actually at our Global Awards not that long ago.
Great, well thank you for that. Going back to obviously the KitKat Heist was one of the big stories of the PR Lions. Danny, what were the judges saying about that and why it won, and how PR agencies performed generally? What was the sort of sense from the judges?
Well, on the KitKat Heist, I went to interview Dana Tahir, who was the president of the PR jury this year, and she said that KitKat Heist was an absolute unanimous favourite among the judges for the PR lines. She talked about the fact that it was a genuine crisis, so there was an element of classic PR crisis response, but it was also, seized upon with some real brave creativity from the creative agencies. So it seemed to be this cultural moment created directly out of a genuine crisis. So in that sense, it's quite unusual for a crisis campaign to win at Cannes. Most of the time, crisis campaigns aren't really talked about, let alone entered. So I think it pleasantly surprised all the judges that it was a classic reputation management campaign that was turned into a brand drive.
Yeah, interesting. And what other things were the jurors saying about how PR held up this year and some of the other big trends, really?
I think you talk to the people on the Lions jury these days, they're not as worried about what is a PR agency or what is an ad agency anymore. They tend to say, well, it's all pretty much the same thing. It's all about tapping into culture. And often earned media campaigns come from all sorts of places. So I don't think they're as concerned as maybe we are on PR Week about the difference between what we would call ad agencies and PR agencies. And let's face it, there's lots of good entries in the PR lines from PR agencies this year. So I'd say it was pretty good. And to have a UK PR agency, Burson London, winning a Grand Prix with joint credit for idea creation is a massive boost for the UK sector, I would say. And of course, Golding Ketchum won a gold for their idea creation on Specsavers, as Siobhan said. And that's about the third or fourth year they've got something at Cannes with Golding London. So overall, I'd say it was a pretty good year for PR and for British PR.
What else do you think about KitKat Heist? I mean, my view of it is it's a really good example of where PR can work with sort of content creation and tapping into, as you say, Danny, that kind of cultural moment. But the way it can sort of seamlessly go from a crisis response, but also, work with a traditional ad agency to produce something that is really enticing as well and come up with some creative ideas around it. It really felt like, integrated is an overused word probably, but it did feel like a proper integrated campaign that is quite unusual, and I can see why it won. It must have stood out a mile among the other entries.
Yeah, it's a classic, isn't it? It's a well-known brand. KitKat is, I think, probably Nestlé's number one selling confectionery, certainly in the UK and large parts of Europe. So it's got everything really in the sense that, as you say, it was very integrated. It was a big brand. I don't know if it drove sales. That's the only thing I couldn't see from the entry. It certainly got a huge amount of engagement. You got 2.2 million people clicking on that code to track down. So for people who don't know, the idea was that these KitKats were stolen, but then consumers who had bought KitKats could put the barcode of their particular chocolate bar into a website and see if it was one that was stolen. So apparently 2.2 million people did that because it was across the States and across the whole world. So in that sense, amazing engagement metrics. I think there's probably a little bit of skepticism about the nature of the crisis, dare I say? Or is that just me? I was talking to somebody, we were just saying, what happened to these 12 tons of chocolate bars? I can't imagine who would hide 12 tons of chocolate bars on the criminal circuit.
It gives slight Willy Wonka vibes, doesn't it? There's something a little bit Roald Dahl about the whole thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why it was so newsworthy. It was just so unusual. And I think there was so much, negativity. And, you think about March, what was happening back in March with the war in the Middle East and so much negativity around. I think people did need a bit of, light relief sounds a bit harsh because this is obviously a crime. But in the wider scheme of things, it reminds me a bit of the KFC running out of chicken crisis, in inverted commas, a few years ago in the UK, where, it is a corporate crisis in a sense. It's a problem, but it's something that people quite enjoy talking about. And it's great that they tapped into that with some creativity.
And at the time as well, it was Easter. That was the shocking factor about it. And chocolate has skyrocketed in price. When you can walk into any supermarket and it's behind security the same way alcohol is. So I think it was a problem for them that they really did flip on its head to turn the crisis into something that they could use. And also making it that sort of influencer element about it, because people were making songs about it. And, it really did tap into the zeitgeist at the time. It had, I think that's what I really enjoy about this campaign, I think, is that it had every element of it. And as you say, Danny, it stemmed from a crisis, which is very unheard of to win at Cannes.
Absolutely. So I thought we could talk about some of the other winners in the PR category. We've been sort of taking a look at those. I'll go first. One that caught my eye, I'm not saying these necessarily the very best, ones that I think are worth picking up on. Not by a PR agency specifically, but it was Ogilvy in Singapore. It's called Vaseline Verified. Now, I think this is a really clever and original influencer campaign that really was all about authenticity and community. So the influencers behind original Vaseline viral hacks that had been copied multiple times were basically tracked down and brought in by the brand Vaseline as partners. They were labelled the Vaseline OGs, which I quite liked. Product lines were created inspired by their hacks. This really puts influencers, as I say, and their communities right at the heart of the campaign. And two of these sort of innovations, they're called Brow Tamer and Makeup Primer, apparently outsold the classic Vaseline jelly itself by 466%. So I really think that was a great example of a genuinely original influencer campaign, and at a time where, as we know, the importance of influencers to big corporations is growing. So I thought that was worth pointing out, really. It'd be good to know actually how much influencer work really showed up among the winners this year. Is that something that sort of came out much, Danny, in the PR Lines and elsewhere?
Yeah, it definitely did. And I also attended the press conference for the Social and Influencer Alliance, and there was some very strong work in that category, often with PR agencies involved as well. Yeah, I feel that's one of the really big trends over the last few years at Cannes, is that really most of the big winning campaigns aren't just earned media campaigns, they're all social media campaigns, and almost all of them have a heavy creator influence element to them. So yeah, I think it showed up very well this year.
And it seemed as though there were more influencers there this year and creators, Danny.
Yeah.
Am I right with that perception?
There were, yes. I hung out with some younger people. I was having a conversation, and yeah, I mean, if you're a Gen Z at Cannes, attending Cannes these days, they're just flying around listening to different influencers talking and DJing and doing all sorts of activities. So it did feel very much like that, Siobhan. It felt like the influencers are now in Cannes as opposed to being talked about at Cannes.
Yeah, great. And Siobhan, what campaign did you want to highlight?
Well, for me, I've obviously watched a few and of the entries and been watching it all this week. And the one that really still stayed in my memory afterwards, I think, has to be the Swedish prescription for Visit Sweden by PrimeWeberShamwick.com. What I liked about it was the fact that they came up with it. It wasn't, another division. It was those in Sweden came up with this idea. But it's a tongue-in-cheek campaign, for those that don't know, where Visit Sweden sort of turned the country into the idea that it could be prescribed by doctors. So they play around with the idea that Sweden's good for your health and your well-being. And it was just funny. And it's plain and simple funny. And as a result, it stuck in my head. I mean, they play around with the tropes you associate with the country, saunas and the beautiful countryside. But at the very end, they listed like side effects you take the prescription to Sweden. So things like you'll have a sudden appreciation for pine trees and an urge to hug them, or visitors have reported disorientation on encountering function in public transport. It's just really funny.
Excellent.
And I think what I liked about it as well, it's playing with that idea of what a travel authority should do about promoting a region. And in the current climate, I think it's what we need. As you said earlier, John, it's dark times at the moment, so sometimes a bit of levity is great. And I'll be honest, it made me think about booking a trip, so it worked. I did think, oh, yeah, not been there.
Is that just because it might be a bit cooler than it is here?
Possibly, yeah. I just want to go hug a tree. But according to Weber, it really did work. They saw a 28.3% year-on-year increase in booking hotel nights in Sweden from the French market. So the campaign did what it was meant to do. So, yeah, that was the winner for me.
Brilliant. I mean, and I think that thing about humour, I mean, I know it's been a few years where we've spoken about humour coming back, and particularly almost sort of as purpose recedes, which I'm sure we can talk about a bit later on, humour seems to be sort of coming up. I think it's really evident this year that humour is really been bigger than ever, particularly among the PR lions. I mean, humour has been coming back probably for a few years. It almost feels as though, as the importance of purpose recedes, humour has kind of overtaken it. But I don't think I've seen quite as many entries, certainly winning entries, that use humour as such an important part of the campaign. And another great example would be the Golan Ketchum campaign for Specsavers around hearing aids, which, ordinarily it's not a product you would associate with humour necessarily, but they did it in a very effective way, and that obviously impressed the jurors as well. So do you agree, Siobhan? Do you think, humour's really back in a big way?
Yeah, I agree with you there, John. Actually, I think there seem to be more funny, in inverted commas, campaigns this year. But I think for the purpose-led ones that were there, they really, really had to show impact, whether that were the undropped kit for Essex or Edelman's The Unburied Casket or the legacy of Virginia de Frey. It was the sort of measurement side of it really had to be there, and it had to be really demonstrated, and that's why I think they were as strong as they were. So there are purpose-led campaigns, but the impact has to be really valuable.
Point. And Danny, do you want to talk about a campaign that particularly impressed you?
Yeah, well, just on the purpose side, I think it is an interesting debate, as Siobhan's been saying, and I did quite like the Edelman Unburied Casket campaign, which was for a charity client, Women for Change, and it was all about the horrifying levels of femicide in South Africa, where, it's almost as if killing your wife in South Africa, in certain parts of South Africa, isn't actually a crime. So they worked on this, I suppose it's a stunt, burying this special casket, which was a symbolic move to show just how awful femicide is in South Africa. And I think it had gone up by 33% in the last few years. So the casket was 33% bigger than normal caskets are. And that Women for Change say that actually they got the South African government to run a 90-day campaign to try and tackle women being killed by their male partners. So I think it definitely had some impact as well. So I actually interviewed Richard Edelman in Cannes, and his viewpoint is that we need to reverse this shift away from purpose. And actually, a lot of the lack of purpose campaigns is just fear in this political climate about running stuff that is actually for good, because they're worried about the Trump government and anti-wokeism. And so his view is we need a return to purpose. And it seems to be that Edelman is doubling down on purpose with a lot of its campaigns. So in that sense, I think it's fascinating that most people are turning away from it, but Edelman is trying to double down on it.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It feels like in the last couple of years, the move away hasn't been from purpose per se, but plastic purpose. That idea that everyone needs to have, you just get some charity, just work it out or create one almost, have something together that will, that will impress the jurors, and then try to get a win from it. But I think you're right. I mean, if that's the change, that effectively, if people are doing purpose, they're at least doing it properly and they're having measurable results, and that's probably a good place for the industry to be, I'd say.
Yeah, there's also the categories like the glass lions and titanium, where purpose comes into it more. So I think it's there. It's just not necessarily in the PR and advertising categories so much.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of moving on. One question I have is, where are the UK independents at Cannes? I mean, there's usually one or two winners by sort of smaller independent UK agencies, but I didn't see any this year. Do you think this is a sign of the times, really, as budgets are being squeezed?
Yes, I do. I agree. I didn't see many entries, certainly in the awards, by independent agencies. I think the independent agencies are finding entries very expensive. I mean, to enter a Cannes Lion now, I think it's about, is it $1,200 or $1,300? And I think the prices have gone up. So I do think it's pricing out, particularly the Lion scheme is pricing out a lot of independents. That said, there are a few UK independents there. The Romans were there, Pretty Green were there, City Press guys showed up as well, and I've probably forgotten a few, but they're there, but they're not necessarily entering awards. I think they see Cannes as useful if they can afford it.
Yeah, interesting. So I thought we could just talk about any other trends, really. It's interesting that one thing we haven't mentioned so far is AI. Presumably that's been a big discussion across the period of the festival. Were there any sort of particular things around AI that struck you, Danny, that people were saying?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's talking about AI, obviously. I think the main debate around AI is, where do you use AI for your advantage in terms of, production and analytics and so on? So clearly people are embracing AI. And indeed, there's a lot of big tech companies in Cannes that are promoting their various AI solutions. But there's also, on the contrary, this debate around, what does it leave space for actual creativity, pure human creativity, but also experiential events, which are massively increasing at the moment. I mean, sport had a huge presence at Cannes, and as I think you've mentioned already, entertainment did as well in terms of entertainment influencers. So there is this sense that while AI is becoming a really valuable tool in our industry, people are yearning more than ever for authentic, real life events and real people and human relationships. So you've got this weird sort of tension going on.
Interesting. Siobhan, did you have any more thoughts on the big trends this year?
Yeah, there seemed to be a lot of sort of, similarly on AI, sort of using tech within the campaign. So you'll have a lot of people maybe using QR codes, KitKat stolen KitKat tracker. Heineken in the pub in there could have been a Heineken campaign, which actually won a Grand Prix, I think, in Social and Creator. It was about WhatsApp voice notes, but you could use tech to then send a voucher that then you could go to the pub with your friend rather than listening to the talk on the voice note. You could have a conversation in person. So yeah, there seems to be a lot of sort of using tech within the campaign work or within the stunt, which I thought seems to be growing. We've seen it in the past, but it definitely seemed to be something I noticed more this year in some of the winners.
Yes, absolutely, Siobhan, good point.
Yeah, really good point to make. Okay, so that's all the time we have. Congratulations to all the winners at Cannes. Do keep an eye on PRWeek.co.uk for various sort of roundup tables of who won the most, who got the biggest number of PR credits, and so on. And have a look at all the work if you get an opportunity. Some really inspiring stuff there. So thanks to Danny and Siobhan, and thank you for listening. Until next time, goodbye.